in the third regular session of the 16th Congress is hereby called to order. Senator Bam Aquino will lead the chamber in prayer.
As we continue on our journey to generate policies to improve the lives of our fellow countrymen, let us listen to the prayer written by the adventurer Sir Francis Drake. May we continue to dream big and work toward a better Philippines for all. The prayer is, "Disturb us, Lord." Disturb us, Lord, when we are too pleased with ourselves, when our dreams have come true because we dreamed too little, when we arrived safely because we sailed too close to the shore. Disturb us, Lord, when with the abundance of things we possess, we have lost our thirst for the waters of life. Having fallen in love with life, we have ceased to dream of eternity, and in our efforts to build a new earth, we have allowed our vision of the new heaven to dim. Disturb us, Lord, to dare more boldly, to venture on wilder seas, where storms will show your mastery, where losing sight of land, we shall find the stars. We ask you to push back the horizons of our hopes, and to push back the future in strength, courage, hope, and love. This we ask in the name of our Captain, who is Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. The Lyceum of the Philippines Harmonic Choir will lead us in the singing of the Philippine National Anthem, after which the group will render a song entitled Tayo'y Mga Pinoy. We thank the Lyceum of the Philippines University Harmonic Choir for that beautiful rendition of our national anthem and the song entitled Tayo'y Mga Pinoy. Maraming salamat po. The Secretary will now call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano Alan Peter Compañero S., Cayetano Pia S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito Enrile Escudero Estrada, Gingona, Hunasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Smeña, Pimentel, Po, Recto, Revilla, Villar, Senate Sosoto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Trillan.
13 senators are present. The chair declares the presence of the quorum. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 17th session, 2nd of September 2015, and consider the same as approved.
Any objection? Hearing none, the reading of the journal of the previous session is hereby, the journal is hereby considered read, and the same is hereby approved.
Mr. President, before we move on to the reference of business, we'd like to acknowledge from the NCIP, Director Carlos Buasen Jr. and Reynaldo Dingal.
The presence of the officials of the NCIP is acknowledged and made of record.
We would also like to acknowledge, Mr. President, Mayor Leonila Montero of Panglao in Bohol.
Mayor Leonila Montero from the municipality of Panglao, Bohol, is recognized. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
The Secretary will read the reference of business.
Bills on first reading. Senate number 21926 entitled An Act Establishing the Special Economic Zone and Freeport in the Province of Ilocos Sur, creating for this purpose the Ilocos Sur Special Economic Zone and Freeport Authority, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, by Senator Sani Angara.
Committee on Economic Affairs, Local Government, Ways and Means, Finance.
Senate number 2927, an act instituting the expanded Balikbayan program, amending for the purpose Republic Act number 6768 as amended by RA number 9174 and for other purposes, Senator Pimentel III.
Tourism, Ways and Means.
Senate number 2928, an act providing for alternative transportation systems, Senator Defensor Santiago.
Public Services.
Senate number 2929, an act requiring a report regarding the effects environmental factors have on women's health, Senator Defensor Santiago.
Health and Demography, Women, Children, Family Relations, Gender Equality.
Resolutions. Senate Joint Resolution number 16 entitled Joint Resolution Adopting and Publishing a Glossary of Significant Housing Terminologies for the Adherence of Key Shelter Agencies and Other Housing Stakeholders, Senator Joseph Victoria Ejercito.
Urban Planning, Housing and Resettlement.
Yes, Resolution number 1557, directing the proper Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation. The report that 113 million pesos in expenses of the Presidential Commission Good Government were accounted for in 2014, Senator Defensor Santiago.
Finance.
Yes, Resolution number 1558, directing the proper Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation. The report that the local government of San Pedro City in Laguna purchased 18 brand new cars worth 13 million pesos without the approval of the Department of Interior and Local Government, Senator Defensor Santiago.
Local Government.
Yes, Resolution number 1559, directing the proper Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the United States House Committee report that an outdated and inefficient land administration system has resulted in fraudulent land titles and widespread land grabbing in the Philippines, Senator Defensor Santiago.
Justice and Human Rights.
PSR number 1560, directing the proper Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation and the report that rampant corruption in vehicle emission testing centers perpetuates the pollution problem caused by Metro Manila traffic congestion.
Public Services.
Yes, Resolution number 1561, directing the Senate Committee on Health and Demography to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into the health hazards of consuming allegedly smuggled food agricultural products that being sold in the local market with the end in view improving food safety and protecting public health, Senator Gingona III.
Health and Demography.
PS Resolution number 1562 urging a review of existing government infrastructure investments in information and communications technology with the end in view of realizing the full potentials of the industry, addressing the slow internet speed in the country, and sustaining economic growth, Senator Grace Poe.
Public Services.
Communications letter from the Office of the President of the Philippines transmitting to the Senate 2 regional copies of the Republic Act number 10670 entitled an act naming the diversion road in Tacloban City, Leyte as Governor Benjamin Cocoy T. Romualdez Diversion Road, which lapsed into law on 20 August 2015 pursuant to Article 6, Section 27, Paragraph 1 of the Constitution.
To the Archives.
Letters from the Office of the President of the Philippines transmitting to the Senate 2 regional copies of the following: Republic Act number 10676, an act protecting the amateur nature of student athletes in the Philippines by regulating the residence requirement and prohibiting the commercialization of student athletes. Republic Act number 10677, an act increasing the bed capacity of the Northern Mindanao Medical Center in Cagayan de Oro City, amending for the purpose Republic Act number 7938, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Republic Act number 10678, converting the Davao Regional Hospital into Davao Regional Medical Center, increasing its bed capacity and appropriating funds therefore, amending for the purpose Republic Act number 7179. Republic Act number 10679, an act promoting entrepreneurship and financial education among Filipino youth. Republic Act number 10680, establishing the Misamis Occidental Sports Academy in the capital city of Requieta, province of Misamis Occidental, and appropriating funds therefore and for the purposes. Republic Act number 10681, establishing the Talisay Sports Academy and Training Center in the city of Talisay, province of Cebu, and appropriating funds therefore. And Republic Act number 10682, establishing the Alfonso Sports Academy and Training Center in the municipality of Alfonso, 7th Congressional District, province of Cavite, and appropriating funds therefore, which were signed by His Excellency President Benigno Aquino III.
To the Archives.
Committee reports. Committee report number 218, prepared and submitted by the Committee on Electoral Reforms and People's Participation on Senate number 2930 with Senators Trillanes IV, Ejercito Estrada, and Pimentel III as authors thereof, entitled an act amending Section 69 and 261 CC of Batas Pambansa bilang 881 others known as the Omnibus Election Code of the Philippines as amended and for other purposes, recommending its approval in substitution of Senate numbers 1146 and 2026, sponsor Senator Pimentel III.
Ordinary Business.
Committee report number 219, submitted jointly by the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, and Finance on House number 3232, introduced by Representative Bulot Begtang, entitled an act separating the Cabugao Agro-Industrial High School Learning Annex in Barangay Lening, Municipality of Cabugao, Province of Apayao, from the Cabugao Agro-Industrial High School, converting it into an independent national high school to be known as Cabugao National High School, and appropriating funds therefore, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Cayetano P.
Ordinary Business.
Committee report number 220, submitted by the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture, and House number 4009, introduced by Representative Violago and Ko Juanco K, entitled an act changing the name of Saverona Elementary School in Barangay Saverona, Municipality of Talugtug, Province of Nueva Ecija, to Alberto G. Bautista Elementary School, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Cayetano P.
Ordinary Business.
Committee report number 221, submitted by the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture, and House number 438, introduced by Representative Erigel, entitled an act changing the name of San Manuel Norte National High School in the Municipality of Agoo, Province of La Union, to Dr. Manuel T. Casas Senior National High School, recommending its approval without amendment, Senator Cayetano P.
Ordinary Business.
Committee report number 222, submitted by the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture, and House number 439, introduced by Representative Erigel, entitled an act changing the name of San Manuel Norte Elementary School in Municipality of Agoo, Province of La Union, to Dr. Manuel T. Casas Senior Elementary School, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Cayetano P.
Ordinary Business.
Committee report number 223, submitted by the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture, and House number 440, introduced by Representative Erigel, an act changing the name of Baybay Elementary School in Barangay San Manuel Sur, Municipality of Agoo, Province of La Union, to San Manuel Sur Elementary School, recommending its approval without amendment, Senator Cayetano P.
Ordinary Business.
Committee report number 224, submitted by the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture, and House number 48, introduced by Representatives Romualda and Ko Juanco K, entitled an act changing the name of Mahinog National High School in Barangay Hubangon, Municipality of Mahinog, Province of Camiguin, to 62A Abaw National High School, recommending its approval without amendment.
Ordinary business.
Committee report number 225 by the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture on House number 3154, introduced by Representative Treñas, entitled An Act Converting the Andres Bonifacio Elementary School in Barangay Halandoni, Wilson City Proper District, Iloilo City into an integrated school to be known as Andres Bonifacio Integrated School, recommending its approval without amendment.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 226 by the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture and Finance on House number 2081, introduced by Representative De Rosario and Cojuangco K, entitled An Act separating the Limbaan National High School Santa Fe Extension in Barangay Santa Fe, Corella, Davao del Norte from the Limbaan National High School, converting it into an independent National High School to be known as Santa Fe National High School, and appropriating funds, therefore recommending approval without amendment. Senator Cayetano P.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 227, submitted by the jointly by the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture and Finance on House number 4918, introduced by Representatives Yu and Cojuangco K, entitled An Act separating the Tukuran Technical Vocational High School, Tabuan Annex in Barangay Tabuan, Municipality of Tukuran, Province of Zamboanga del Sur from the Tukuran Technical Vocational High School, converting it into an independent national high school to be known as Tabuan National High School, and appropriating funds, therefore recommending approval without amendments. Sir Cayetano P.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 228 by the Committees on Education and Culture and Finance on House number 5921, introduced by Representative Zamora and Cojuangco K, entitled An Act separating the Compostela National High School, Corazon C. Aquino High School Annex in Barangay Usmeña, Compostela, Province of Compostela Valley from the Compostela National High School, converting it into an independent national high school to be known as Corazon C. Aquino National High School, and appropriating funds, therefore recommending its approval without amendment. Senator Cayetano P.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 229 by the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture and Finance on House number 4291, introduced by Representatives Bulot Begtang and Cojuangco K, entitled An Act separating the National High School, the Luna National High School, Tumog Annex in Barangay Tumog, Luna, Apayao from the Luna National High School, converting it into an independent National Agricultural and Trade High School to be known as Tumog National Agricultural and Trade High School, and appropriating funds, therefore recommending approval without amendment. Senator Cayetano P.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 230, submitted jointly by the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture and Finance on House number 4367, introduced by Representatives Advincula and Cojuangco K, entitled An Act separating the General Emilio Aguinaldo National High School Annex in Barangay Pasong Buaya 2, Imus City, Province of Cavite, from the General Emilio Aguinaldo National High School, converting it into an independent national high school to be known as General Licerio Topacio National High School, and appropriating funds, therefore recommending approval without amendments. Senator Cayetano P.
Ordinary business.
Committee report number 231, submitted jointly by the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture and Finance on House number 4262, introduced by Representative Enerio Ceriles and Cojuangco K, entitled An Act establishing a national high school in Barangay Tikwas, Municipality of Dumalinaw, Province of Zamboanga del Sur, to be known as Maria Clara Lobregat National High School, and appropriating funds, therefore recommending its approval without amendment. Senator Cayetano P.
Calendar for ordinary business. Before we go to the additional reference of business, the Majority Leader is recognized, and the Chair proposes that we go into our main agenda on the bills on the agenda before we go to the additional reference of business. Yes, Mr. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, may I ask for a suspension, please?
1 minute suspension. Si Bongbong, sabi. Pakita lang muna kasi
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the additional reference of business.
The Secretary will read the additional reference of business.
Messages from the House of Representatives. Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 1 September 2015, it reconsidered the approval on third reading on the following House bills and requests the said bills be transmitted back to the House of Representatives. House Number 5940, entitled An Act Renewing for Another 25 Years the Franchise Granted to Progressive Broadcasting Corporation under Republic Act Number 7163 as amended by Republic Act Number 8162, and House Number 5982, entitled An Act Renewing for Another 25 Years and expanding to radio television broadcasting national scope throughout the Philippines the franchise granted to Mabuhay Broadcasting System Inc. under Republic Act Number 7395, entitled An Act granting the Mabuhay Broadcasting System Inc. a franchise to construct, install, operate, and maintain radio broadcasting stations in the island of Luzon and for other purposes.
Public Services. The chair would suspend in the meantime the additional reference of business. We'll take it up again at the later hour. The majority leader, is recognized.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2894 under Committee Report number 200. This is the bill on the basic law for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Continuation of the consideration of Senate Bill number 2894 under the Committee Report 200 is in order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status is that we are in the period of interpellations. I thus move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Marcos.
Senator Marcos is recognized.
And that we recognize Senator Legarda to interpolate on the measure, Mr. President.
Senator Legarda is recognized on the period of interpellation. We declare a 1-minute recess to allow Senator Legarda to prepare.
Mr. President, just an administrative matter, if we may resume for a second.
All right, session is resumed.
Mr. President, we'd just like to manifest that Senator Osmeña will be taking the place of Senator Lapid in the Committee on Ways and Means, and both senators have come to an agreement already, Mr. President.
This is election of a new member?
Yes, Mr. President, and
okay.
And Senator Lapid will be. We move to elect Senator Osmeña to the Committee on Ways and Means, Vice Senator Lito Lapid.
There's a motion that Senator Sergio Osmeña III be elected to the Committee on Ways and Means in lieu for the vacancy created by the resignation from the committee of Senator Lapid. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. We move to suspend again, Mr. President.
1-minute suspension. With the permission of the chamber, we resume. Session is resumed, and we once more recognize Senator Bongbong Marcos on the period of interpellation on Senate Bill 2894, and to avail of the period of interpellation, Senator Loren Legarda.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the distinguished chairman of the Committee on Local Government, sponsor of the BBL measure, yield to clarificatory questions?
Certainly, Mr. President. But before I do, the chair asked in the last session as to the residual powers of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region on inland waters, specifically on Lake Lanao. And I would just like also to make I would like to make the point that originally in the so-called palace version, the under SB 2084, the exclusive power over inland waters was given to the BAR, the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. However, under the substitute bill which I have filed, we have removed that exclusive power from the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region for the specific reason that local governments which have territorial jurisdiction over inland waters shall continue to exercise such powers and enjoy the privileges over such a body of water. Now, normally, in the conduct of writing the substitute bill, Mr. President, what we had done was to move some powers from exclusive powers of the BAR to concurrent powers. However, in the case of the inland waters, we did not do so. for the simple reason that we did not want the national government to exercise any powers over the inland waters, and therefore the residual powers remain with the Bangsamoro Autonomous Regions. In particular, the jurisdiction over inland waters remains with the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, and specifically as a residual power, the ancestral domain and natural resources, the definition thereof, belong now with the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. And furthermore, the entire subject of inland waterways navigation is also a residual power that remains with the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. And of course, the Bangsamoro Parliament will have the power to define what the rules are for navigation within the inland waters. Furthermore, the Bangsamoro Parliament may also see fit to pass legislation that will enhance and protect inland waters in whatever way in the region without prejudice to the rights and interests of the local government units, such as natural resources. So that is the answer. I have just summarized it. I have a memorandum for the chair, and I'll give the chair a copy of.
Thank you very
of
much,
said
Senator Marcos. So we now once more recognize Senator Legarda.
Certainly, Mr. President, I yield to the gentle lady from Antique and Ilocos.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to ask about Article 2, Section 6 of Senate Bill 2894, which states, the Bangsamoro Parliament shall adopt the official flag, emblem, administrative seal, and anthem of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. This provision for the adoption of a flag is not contained in the Organic Act for the Arm or in the Expanded Arm Law. It is also absent in the Local Government Code of 1991. It is Section 1, Article 16 of the 1987 Constitution that provides for the flag of the Philippines. Section 44 of RA 8491, or the Flag and Heraldic Code of the Philippines, allows the adoption of administrative insignias by government entities. May I therefore pose this question? May I know why is it necessary to expressly provide for the adoption of a flag by the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region? Would not the adoption of the flag be construed as conferring the status of a sub-state on the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in violation of the 1987 Constitution?
Yes, Mr. President. First of all, this section, this provision was actually contained in the original draft BBL. And upon examination and further study, I felt that it was not necessary to remove it, because if we look at the experience, first of all, that they are in fact, because they are a government entity, they are in fact allowed to have such symbols that are specific to that entity. And if we look around the local government units, many of our cities and provinces have also adopted a flag for themselves. They have designed a flag for themselves. Generally speaking, there's even a provincial hymn. There is sometimes a provincial prayer. But in any case, these are things that fall under the normal practice of the LGUs, and we did not feel it was objectionable in any way. There was that concern that it would be construed as recognizing a separate sub-state. However, the argument was seen that it is done by most of our LGUs, cities and provinces, and therefore it is understood that just because you have a flag for your province or your city, or now for your autonomous region, that does not mean that you are separate in any way from the Republic.
That is correct, Mr. President. In fact, the anthem of every LGU, we hear that when we visit. However, the flag of an LGU, Ilocos Norte has its own flag, Mr. President?
Yes, it does, Mr.
Oh,
President. Yes.
It also has. and its own emblem and seal, of course. Yes.
Well, we have the seal of the provincial government of Ilocos Norte. I believe Lawag City has its own flag as well, and the same same emblem. Again, these are examples close to home. There are many other examples all around the country where it can be clearly seen that there are political entities with such emblems, with such symbols, and they are not construed, and we feel they're not construed as the creation or the representing a sub-state.
Yes.
And we feel that although there were certain greater, stronger misgivings and fears about the creation of a sub-state or a state within a state with the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, we felt that the flag would not raise those suspicions or fears, simply because our experience with other provinces and cities has been that they do have their own symbols for.
I thank the good gentleman for that clarification, because when I tried to compare the expanded arm law and the Organic Act of the Arm, it did not contain this provision. But with your clarification of local governments having an anthem, having their seal, having even a flag, then, and we did not bestow on them the sub-state position or status, then that clarifies it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, actually, yes, that was simple enough. Actually, we
Yes.
felt that if there was no need to remove it. Of course, the argument when we first looked at it, we discussed it and said, may not this be another one of those little signals that people are fearing, that this is a part of the creation of a state within a state. And again, with the experience of cities and provinces, I feel that that is not something that will be construed as such by our people or our officials.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. President. My second question pertains to Article 3, Section 10 of the substitute bill, or when it speaks about the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region waters. I will no longer read Section 10 into the record. I will simply ask my question. As nautical miles, in quotation marks, is the same distance of the territorial sea provided in the UN Convention on the Law of the Seas, or UNCLOS, is the reference to 22.224 kilometers or 12 nautical miles as reflected in Section 10 to be construed as giving the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region its own territorial seas?
Well, they come under the same category as municipal waters, but of course they are not municipal. They are of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. There was some concern raised about the fact that the Bangsamoro regional waters will be the equivalent of the national waters. However, if we are to take the municipal waters of an ordinary local government unit, they extend already to 15. What is it, the exact figure? 15. No, nautical miles. They extend already to 15 kilometers from the low water mark on the coast. And we felt that the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region should have more jurisdiction over a larger expanse of water, because then we will have again the conflict between the local government units' power of supervision and administration as defined in the local government code. So we wanted to make it clear that there are additional waters that are being granted to the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. We cannot grant more than that, because that is already to the extent of the 12 nautical mile limit. That is the national limit. And so that is as good as we could do in terms of granting to the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region its own offshore waters, without conflicting with the municipal waters of the ordinary LGUs of 15 kilometers. So there is an additional, from the 15 kilometers of municipal waters, there is an additional 7 kilometers of seas that are considered to be still under the jurisdiction of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Waters. Of course, those still belong to the territory of the Republic of the
Philippines. Thank you for that, Mr. President. I proceed now to Article 6, Section 23 of the substitute bill, and it explains what asymmetric relationship is. Can this representation be clarified on the asymmetric relationship? In any asymmetrical relationship, there is, in my understanding, a superior entity and an inferior entity. However, Section 23, Article 6 of the bill does not state which entity is a superior one and which is the inferior. May the sponsor kindly clarify on the meaning of asymmetric political relationship?
Yes, this was a bit of a ticklish problem. It took a long time for us to find the actual definition of the asymmetric relationship in this particular case. And the assumption at the very beginning was that it was an asymmetric relationship between the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region and the national government. It turns out that this is not correct, because when that was first explained to the committee, it was told that yes, the relationship of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region with the national government is asymmetric, and I countered by saying that all relationships of all LGUs with the national government are asymmetric. So what is the point of having this definition, or having this having anything that talks about the asymmetric relationship? However, upon further study with this particular bill and with other bills that define other laws around the world that define an asymmetric relationship, what is really being referred to in this case is not the relationship between the, well, it does. In a way, it still refers to the relationship between the national government and the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, but what it is asymmetric to is the relationship of the local government units to the national government. Therefore, what it means in the end is, to put it simply, the relationship of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region to the national government is asymmetric to the relationships of other LGUs to the national government. So the asymmetry is not between the national government and the Bangsamoro government. The asymmetry is between the relationship of the Bangsamoro government and the national government, and the relationships of LGUs to the national government. To be very simple about it, all it says is that the relationship of Bangsamoro government to the national government is different from the local government's relationship. So in other words, they are different from an ordinary local government unit.
Mm-hmm. I also ask this question, Mr. President, because the asymmetric political relationship is also not present, or was not present, in the text of 6734 and 9054. So I just felt that care must be taken in our definition of this asymmetric political relationship in the substitute bill, so that there is a clear understanding and we do not make the mistake of the Memorandum of Agreement, or the MOA AD, which also mentioned this term.
I think, Mr. President, there was a need for that term to be explained, because unlike in the situation of ARM, there were many added. In the ARM, it was very clear that the powers, exclusive powers, that were given to ARM were those that were enumerated in the Constitution. However, in the draft BBL and in the substitute bill, there are other powers that have been added onto that, and to be able to understand why that is to have to explain this concept of asymmetry between local government units and the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. In essence, what it is saying is that we recognize that the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region is different from every other local government unit. and it has greater autonomy, it has greater devolution of powers, etc. And having done so, then we are consistent with the additional powers which we are granting to the Bangsamoro government. Once we accept the idea that they are different from other local government units, then we do not have to continue to insist that they become, again, they revert back to what is an ordinary, a so-called quote-unquote ordinary local government unit, and to be seen as different. And therefore, because of that difference, hence, flowing from that will be the asymmetric relationship, the different relationship Bangsamoro Autonomous Region has with the national government as compared to the relationship of other LGUs to the national government.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. I proceed to Article 8, Section 65 of the bill, and this is the basic rights in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. I will no longer read all the rights which are guaranteed in this section. I proceed to my question. Should we consider Article 8, entitled Basic Rights, as necessary in view of the existing Bill of Rights under Article 3 of the 1987 Constitution? Is not the Bill of Rights sufficient for purposes of protecting the rights of the Bangsamoro people and other peoples within the Bangsamoro region, Mr. President?
Yes, I would say that the Bill of Rights would be sufficient. However, again, this was contained in the draft Bangsamoro Basic Law. It seemed that there was no harm in keeping it in, seeing as it was just an enumeration of the rights as enshrined in the Bill of Rights, and it merely repeats the enumeration of such rights.
Yes.
I do not think that there is any harm done by having it there, and so as to not change too much or whatever is not necessary to change in the draft, I left it in.
It is for emphasis.
Just
Yes.
for emphasis. I do not think it does any harm. I think it is. We are always well served to be reminded of the Bill of Rights, the rights of every human being. And I think that especially in this case where we are starting out in designing an entirely new form of government, that it would be still be useful to keep it as a touchstone so that we always remember that these rights must be deemed as inviolable.
Thank you, Mr. President. Still on the list of the Bill of Rights, most noteworthy is the fact that the rights of women in the BBL, as enumerated, is limited to political participation, based on what I read. Is this intended to limit women's rights in Mindanao or in Bangsamoro? Should we not also specify the rights of women to many other things, such as the right to economic emancipation, to establish and pursue livelihood, to maternal health care, etc.? And how about the more progressive rights of the LGBT community against discrimination? How are they protected under this provision on basic rights?
In Section 65, there is one. I think the lady is referring to paragraph or subsection B, G. G.
Yes,
Right
G.
of women to political participation and protection from all forms of violence, which is just a general description of those rights. However, if I can call your attention, Mr. President, to Section 75 on page 38, it is a more detailed. Enumeration of the rights of women, and the title is Protection of Women and Children. So there is a more detailed explanation on what those rights are, and I think that on the second paragraph, there is mention of the economic, social, and cultural rights. The right to health and education of women is also recognized. So I do not know if that is sufficient for the good lady, but certainly we'll be open to a further clarification in that regard.
Yes,
on that
thank you
subject.
for indicating that. May we study that at the proper time. If need be, we would include more rights for women in other sectors. And which brings me to my next question. How about the rights of the LGBT community against discrimination?
No specific. We do not have any specific mention of that, Mr. President. As we look through the text of the substitute bill, Section 76 then goes on to speak of the participation of women in the government, which is what I think the lady was referring to
Yes.
earlier. But no, there is no specific. There is no specific mention on the LGBT and the enumeration of the further rights that are perhaps as has been described as the more progressive rights for women. Seeing as I am not an expert on the subject, this has actually been raised by another lady senator in her interpellation, and it would seem that we could use a further clarification and further language on the subject, and certainly we will be looking forward to any suggestions and proposals that the lady senator would like to make.
Thank you for that openness, Mr. President. At the proper time, we will propose provisions that would include perhaps the rights of the LGBT community against discrimination. Thank you.
Well, that would be most welcome, Mr. President.
Again, I cannot find in the substitute bill a prohibition against cruel, degrading, or inhuman punishment provided in Section 19, Article 3 of the 1987 Constitution.
Oo nga. Well, I would like to point out on Section 5, letter A, there is still the right to life and inviolability of one's person and dignity. Furthermore, we go back to Section 75, where we speak of the Bangsamoro Regional Government shall uphold and protect the fundamental rights of women and children, including the right of women to engage in lawful employment. Women and children, especially orphans of tender age, shall be protected from exploitation, abuse, or discrimination and all forms of sexual and gender-based violence, especially in times of crisis.
What I'm actually referring to, Mr. President, is as recent experience would tell us, like in Mama Sapano, there were very brutal, degrading forms of violence and punishment, beheading, and so much cruelty, not just in Mama Sapano, but in many years ago, and even in my experience as a young journalist going to various areas. And so, do you think there should be a provision against such, just again for emphasis, against cruel, degrading, or inhuman punishment?
Well,
That should be stated, since this is a new region, a new law, new, so that we could emphasize the need to remind our brothers and sisters who had digressed from what a human being would actually do, because there have been so many cruel violations in this respect.
Yes, Mr. President. I believe that since the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region still falls under national law and the Constitution, that we have sufficient laws to safeguard against what it can only be described as murder, torture, assassination, termination, and all these other abuses that we have seen, not only in Mama Sapano, but in the entire time of conflict. But we also have included in Section 66, page 35, something that is not specific just to women or children, but in general, we speak of human rights, where The rights, all laws and policies, including customary laws, shall conform to international human rights and humanitarian standards. And with that we quote, the rights under the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and other international human rights shall be guaranteed by the Bangsamoro Regional Government. So I believe with the confluence of all of these different international laws and the local laws that we have here in the Philippines, that we have covered I beg your pardon, that we have covered all of the possible instances of abuse that might occur, that we have seen has occurred, then to not have to suffer such abuse of human rights in the future in Bangsamoro, in the Bangsamoro region, or for that matter, the rest of the country.
Thank you for that clarification. I had to bring it up in the light of recent events and wanted to put on record my concern for such acts that were done this year. I proceed now to my next point, which also includes basic rights. Again, the 1987 Constitution, in Article 2, Section 16, provides for, and I quote, the right to a balanced and healthful ecology in accordance with the rhythm and harmony of nature. Would you agree that this additional right must be emphasized, must be included in Article 65, the right of citizens to a sound environment in accordance with the rhythm and harmony of nature?
I certainly would say that would be something that we would be desirous of. Certainly, we would not like to encourage or endorse any sort of activity which would degrade what our very precarious environmental situations as it is. And certainly, if we are to say that a balanced environment and an environment that propagates the ecology rather than ruins it should certainly be part of the rights that any Filipino, Bangsamoro or otherwise, should enjoy.
Thank you. And so at the proper time, this representation, with the permission of the sponsor, would include it as part of the rights on 65.
I believe that it has a place when in the definition of the basic rights which are to be respected by the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. I believe that again, since it is already in the Constitution, the Bangsamoro government still has to operate in consistently with the Constitution, the Constitution of the Philippines. So that would have been sufficient. But again, to restate it, I think is not does not cause any harm. And I believe that to restate it will be to remind us all that how important these rights are.
Thank you, Mr. President. I proceed now to Article 2, Section 5, in the Bangsamoro identity, on the definition of indigenous peoples. In the 1987 Constitution, it uses the term indigenous cultural communities, which is contained in the proposed measure. However, subsequent laws and policies of many government agencies now use the term indigenous peoples in accordance with developments in international law and national usage. May we know why the term indigenous cultural communities is used and not indigenous peoples? And would a good sponsor be amenable to using the term indigenous peoples?
The reason for that, Mr. President, is that if we look at Section 4, there is a definition of the Bangsamoro people. Now, if we just took that definition, the so-called IPs would be also considered as Bangsamoro people. However, in the hearings that were conducted, in the meetings that I had with the leaders of the IPs, they said, we are not Bangsamoro. and we cannot be Bangsamoro. They have very strict cultural rules as to changing their identity and changing their name. As a matter of fact, the example that was given to me during one of the hearings was that if we now become defined as Bangsamoro, our ancestors will not recognize us and will not know who we are anymore. And that is clearly a cultural concern. And it was actually from the IPs that the term non-Moro indigenous cultural communities came from. And they said we are non-Moro indigenous peoples.
Yes.
Because the Muslims can also be considered as indigenous people. Because by the definition on Section 4, they certainly would be included as the indigenous peoples, non-Moro indigenous peoples would be included as Bangsamoro. And they felt that it was important that they maintain their strict identity, and for various reasons, and they should not be included under the definition of Bangsamoro people. Hence, their suggestion to use the term non-Moro indigenous cultural communities.
Mr. President, we refer to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, where that term was used, adopted way back in 2006. And in the Philippines, we refer to the IPRA law, where it calls it Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, and the various administrative orders of the DepEd on IP education, admin orders of a DOH on IP health, or admin orders of a DILG on IP mandatory representation. And so, for uniformity, we are suggesting, if it is consistent with the hearings and based on your consultations with the non-Moro indigenous peoples or ICCs within the Bangsamoro region, so that there could be uniformity with what government is using now and with what the international community is using now. I'm referring, of course, to the it's a term.
Yes.
We know what we're referring to. Yes, so these are the Lumads of Mindanao who are non-Moros. So whether we use ICC or IP, that is my question. Yes.
I think the necessity was felt by the IPs in Muslim Mindanao because of Section 4. Because by Section 4, they would be defined also as Bangsamoro, which is not something that they wanted. And therefore, they came up with this term of non-Moro. What we could do to make it more consistent with usual practice,
Yes.
is talk about non-Moro indigenous peoples.
And that would be best, perhaps,
So perhaps
that
we
we're
could-
consistent with... what is this? Oh, okay. This is the committee report. Oh, Mr. President, to be consistent also with page 6, section 18, the Declaration on the Rights of Non-Moro Indigenous Peoples, you actually have it here. So could we just kindly use one term so there is no confusion?
Well, because Section 5 actually is referring to the communities rather than the peoples. That is why we are using non-Moro indigenous cultural communities, because it specifically is referring to the IPRA law.
Yes.
And so, hence, we are not talking about individuals here, but we are talking about communities, such as tribes, such as, essentially tribes. And that's why we now have the use of the Declaration of the Rights of Non-Moro Indigenous People. It was just, again, a method, a way by which the IPs were satisfied that they are not included in the as Bangsamoro. They are non-Muslim, and that is why they wanted to make clear that they are of a different
Of course.
ethnic origin.
Yes, I am one with you in that. It is very clear that the Bangsamoro region does not only contain those who profess to the Islamic faith, whom we call our Muslim brothers and sisters, or the Moro, for the Bangsamoro, but also Christians and other faiths, as well as the Lumads, or those who have been there for a long, long time, who are either called indigenous peoples, who are part of indigenous cultural communities. Again, it is a matter of consistency in the usage of the term. I leave it to your better judgment, but this representation suggestion is so that our use of term would be consistent with policies of the OH, the DepEd, and the United Nations, that indigenous peoples be used. Perhaps further study can be conducted by the committee so that there is no confusion with the names of our laws previously as well.
Certainly. I think essentially what we are trying to do here, and the very simple argument that the IPs made, was that because of the Islamic nature of the Bangsamoro people, they wanted to make very clear we were in Mindanao before Islam arrived.
Yes.
And hence we should not be included in the Bangsamoro. That was the main concern. There were some very interesting cultural narratives that were made during the hearings to explain why that is such an important thing. There was even some explanation in one of the tribes that said, if we are no longer what we used to be and have become Bangsamoro, and when we die, our souls will not know where to go. They
Yes,
will not go
true.
to the home of the souls of our people.
Yes.
And and again, as I explained earlier, that our dead ancestors will not know where to find us because we are no longer the same. We are no longer of the same people. So these are very profound cultural concerns on their part, and that's what we had tried to address. So perhaps we can just make the differentiation between IPs, non-Moro IPs, and the non-Moro indigenous cultural communities. Perhaps the term cultural communities could be changed so that non-Moro indigenous peoples can be an all overarching term
I agree
for
with you there.
not just the groups but everyone.
Everyone.
Who is an indigenous person, whose population is indigenous to the region but is not Moro, not
Yes.
Muslim.
Yes, I agree with you, Mr. President. And so it's very clear that the non-Moro indigenous peoples residing within the soon-to-be-declared Bangsamoro region have been there since time immemorial, have their own culture and faiths and beliefs and rituals, which are as important as the Moros and the Bangsamoro within the region.
Quite so, and
Yes.
it's recognition of that we have tried to put a subcategory in the definition of the peoples, the indigenous peoples in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. I would now go to the powers of the government. And in Article 5, Section 20, there's a section on concurrent powers and the Ministry for Non-Moro Indigenous Peoples, which we just discussed. May this representation be enlightened on the powers that are envisioned to be held or exercised by this Ministry of Non-Moro Indigenous People. Who will appoint them, the heads of the ministry, the members of the ministry, and will the officials be non-Moro IPs, since it is a non-Moro indigenous people's ministry?
Although it is not set, yes, Mr. President, although it is not specified in the substitute bill, of course, the reason for the organization of such a ministry is precisely to make certain that the rights as enshrined in the IPRA law of the indigenous cultural communities are observed and respected, and therefore it would seem to be that although we have left it open, it would seem to be a natural requirement that a representative, perhaps nominated by the IPs, should be the ones heading or sitting in that ministry. But of course, this is still left open to. We used to have the Ministry on Muslim Affairs, Department of Muslim Affairs in this country, and necessarily I do not know if it was enshrined in law, but necessarily always the head of that ministry and most of the personnel in that ministry or in that entity were Muslims. And so in like fashion, we should do the same here. And I would imagine that it would be contrary to logic to appoint a minister of indigenous people's affairs who is not an indigenous, who was not a member of the group of IPs.
Understood.
So still, yes, in concept that is certainly the idea, because the entire brief that is given to that or that ministry will be to make sure to monitor, to have an oversight over the conduct of the Bangsamoro government, especially in relation to the cultural communities and the IPs. So yes, the short answer is yes. It would seem to be natural that IP would head such an organization.
What happens to the jurisdiction of the NCIP over the ministry?
Good question. Hindi natin ginawa.
Will the creation of the ministry mean that the NCIP will no longer have any jurisdiction over this ministry?
Ano, no? Well, as there is a general provision also in the substitute bill that we do not violate any of the provisions of the IPRA law, and the NCIP's role is well defined within the IPRA law, and so this ministry would be more concerned with issues on the IPs within the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. And should they require assistance, then certainly the NCIP could come in and perhaps assist or coordinate or cooperate or the ministry when it comes to such issues. So again, there are it is an attempt to maintain a strict observance of the laws as they stand now, and therefore there will be no diminution in the powers, functions, responsibilities of the NCIP as laid out in the IPRA law. And that is, perhaps you could even say that the ministry of the indigenous peoples, with the non-more indigenous peoples within the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, its very reason for existence is to make sure that those provisions, those powers, those rights are once again observed and respected. That is, I think, essentially what the IPs were going after when they suggested this. That they wanted to be sure that their rights were not trampled by any group, by any individual in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region.
Under the same provision, Mr. President, what will be the status of previously issued CADTIS and CALTIS? The Certificate of Ancestral Domain Titles and the Certificate of Land Titles.
Once again, we have kept all the provisions in the substitute bill that concern the IPs consistent with the IPRA law. As a matter of fact, a guiding principle when it came to the IPs was that we do not we approach it in the local government code. We cannot allow any implied amendments to the IPRA law, and we must be very rigorous in the implementation and in the enforcement of the IPRA law within the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. You know, the lady has focused on precisely what could be a very serious potential problem in terms of the ancestral domain.
So it's good you're putting it on record and
It is
clarifying it.
that is precisely what we had in mind, because again, since I was saying the guiding principle was to stay within that and make sure that the IPRA law is well observed and well implemented by the Bangsamoro government. And again, as I said, the lady has focused on a potential area where there already, actually it's no longer potential, there already are problems in the South between ancestral domain, between I have to say I'm very uneasy using the word Moro, because since I was a child, Moro was a derogatory term.
Not anymore now.
I guess not,
Yeah.
because it derives from the Spanish word Moor, which it is rather the Spanish word Moor, which was not coined in a very charitable way. But never mind. To go to go beyond that, there are already conflicts between what have been declared as ancestral domain of IPs and other Muslim communities. And that is specifically what they were concerned about, that their ancestral domains be respected. And hence the enumeration of all these different, hence the organization of the entity of the Ministry of IP, for the IPs, for the non-Moro IPs, and for the strict adherence in every way, in all provisions concerning the IPs to the IPRA law. And that is something that was the basis for all that we have done when it came to the non-Moro indigenous peoples.
Thank you for that clarification. Apart from the IPRA law, of course, we assume that the draft measure and the people within the Bangsamoro region will respect the UN Declaration on the Rights of the Indigenous Peoples with regards to the rights of the non-Moro IPs within the Bangsamoro region.
Well, we do not have it as it's specifically laid out in the substitute
But that
bill.
is assumed, of course.
That
yes.
that is assumed, but again, I do not think it does us any harm to be reminded that in the formation of this new form of government, that we be reminded on the basic principles which we must very strictly adhere to.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. I would like to proceed now to the Trade and Industry section on barter trade and counter trade. It said, Section 174, that the Bangsamoro Regional Government shall regulate traditional barter trade and counter trade with Indonesia, Malaysia, or Brunei. The goods or items to be traded that are traded with the said country shall not be sold elsewhere in the country without proper payment of appropriate customs or import duties, etc. My question is, under the original bill, one of the exclusive powers of the Bangsamoro government is that of trade and counter trade with other ASEAN countries. In the Senate version, ASEAN is replaced with and limited only to Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei, notwithstanding the fact that there are other nations within ASEAN. May this representation know the reason for such delimitation?
Well, we are actually returning to the original language. The ASEAN, the language where ASEAN is ASEAN is included, was new in the draft BBL. And when upon further study, it turns out that the barter and counter trade is only conducted with Malaysia, Brunei, and Indonesia at the moment. That is something that has been recognized by many governments over the past decades, and it is something that we believe is part of the cultural identity of the Bangsamoro people and the Muslims in southern Mindanao. Furthermore, if we were to change the list and include it with ASEAN, then there is a possibility that it be construed as entering into trade agreements or some kind of agreements with international agreements with another sovereign nation. If it is not a nation that that has been known to be a traditional bartering partner of Muslim Mindanao. And that would then we would get into questions of sovereignty. The Montevideo Convention clearly states one of the attributes of a state is its ability to enter into partnerships, agreements with other sovereign nations, and this could be construed as that. So to remove that any of that uncertainty, we kept the definition close to the three countries, which in fact are the three countries that Muslim Mindanao has traditionally barter traded with, not only as recognized in the past decades by many governments, but for hundreds of years now.
And therefore, what the sponsor means is we are formalizing what has been traditional barter trade between and among these areas, these jurisdictions, with the Bangsamoro region with these three countries, it does not at all refer limiting trade between and among the Bangsamoro region with other countries. It just refers to the barter trade and counter trade,
Yes.
which has been traditionally done.
That's right. It actually defines what is under the control of the Bangsamoro government, because this is something that is conducted only by that part of the Philippines in Mindanao. This is not we do not really conduct barter trade in any other part of the country. But again, it is once again we return to the idea that all of this is a recognition of the differences in culture and in history, and the respect for that culture and that history, and the desire to continue to endorse the promotion of that culture and that history. So it is too much part already of the identity of Muslim Mindanao to conduct barter and counter trade. And to remove that would be to limit, again, the definition of their culture. And that is not something that we would want to do. Hence this close definition. Again, but then we start to creep up onto the issue of sovereignty. And so that is why we made sure that that is very clear. It is because it is traditional. It's not something new. It is not a new international arrangement. It is something that has been going on for hundreds of years, has happened since before there even was a Republic of the Philippines, and this is a recognition of that.
Mr. President, by December of 2015, the Philippines will begin or has started its accession into the AEC, or the ASEAN Economic Community. Does this provision have any repercussion on our accession into AEC, or the other way around, will our accession into the ASEAN Economic Community have any impact on the newly created Bangsamoro region and its barter trade and counter trade with these three countries mentioned, which are part of ASEAN?
I believe not, Mr. President, simply because barter and counter trade are very well defined and very well understood. And I do not believe that any of the elements of the ASEAN integration would include barter or counter trade, because it is a very small part of the actual trade that goes on between our ASEAN partners. And again, it is something well understood by our ASEAN partners, as I believe many of the countries in ASEAN also have this kind of traditional arrangement. But so long as it does not intrude into trade policy of the entire country, and I cannot see how it would, considering that very little money actually exchanges. In counter trade, there is some cash that exchanges hands, but in barter trade, it is really goods for goods. But in any case, the percentage of total trade is very small, and it is almost impossible to include it in any such international arrangement, simply because monetary value is difficult to assess and does not really reflect the importance of the barter trade.
As my last question, Mr. President, we have the 1992 National Integrated Protected Areas Law, and just recently, the Senate passed its version of the expanded NEPAS law, which declares more than 100 areas of our country as protected areas. With the passage of these Bangsamoro, what happens to protected areas within the Bangsamoro region?
Well, the NEPAS law still applies. It is a national law. It still applies. However, as an additional power, the Bangsamoro government can declare reserves. They can declare areas.
Marine MPAs,
all kinds
areas,
of reserves, all kinds of protected areas. They can, if it is in their view, although not included in the NEPAS law, as in the listing under the NEPAS law, that they can include it as, they can declare them as reserves and conduct, because it is under their jurisdiction, conduct themselves accordingly, i.e. not allow industry to come in, not allow the denudation of forests, the preservation of watersheds, all of these very important elements that we are trying to that we are trying to formalize and institutionalize in the NEPAS law. So we not only do we have the NEPAS law available to them, they themselves have further powers to declare within Bangsamoro autonomous regions all of these all of these protected areas, reserves and maritime protected areas. All of these are available to the Bangsamoro government, and the Parliament, the Bangsamoro Parliament, of course, can pass any laws to enforce such declarations.
It's good if the bias would be in favor of protection, Mr. President, and conservation. On the other hand, can the Bangsamoro Parliament remove areas from protection or from protected areas or from NEPA's coverage?
No,
No,
Mr. President,
they
that would
cannot.
be a violation of the law.
Okay.
And
That's-
being a national law, they certainly would not be allowed to do that.
With that, I thank the good gentleman for his for his patience and his very competent answers. I commend him for the many weeks of and months of study and for clarifying many of the questions that I have. Thank you, Mr. President. At the proper time, as I said, I will input, with your agreement, my amendments based on my interpretations.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Madam Senator, and thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Legarda. Thank you, Senator Marcos, with the permission of the chamber.
Mr. President,
Sorry?
a minute suspension.
1 minute suspension. Huh?
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, there is no one else scheduled to interpellate for today. Therefore, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2894 under Committee Report number 200.
Any objection? Hearing none. Suspended.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
With the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2835 under Committee Report number 177. This is the Anti-Ambulance Chasing Bill, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, in order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we closed the period of committee amendments last September 2. I thus move that we open the period of individual amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none, in order.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Angara.
Senator Angara is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, Majority Leader. If I may be allowed to propound my individual amendment.
Please proceed.
Mr. President, it is on page 1, section 3, line 16, to insert the phrase after the word case.
I'm sorry, can we have that again, Senator
Yes.
Angara?
On page 1, line 16,
Yes, please.
before the word case, or after the word case,
Yes.
to insert the phrase for recovery of monetary claim or benefit, comma, including legal interest, comma, arising from accident, comma, illness or death. So the provision will read, Mr. President, Section 3, compensation or benefit, any contract or arrangement between the seafarer or other workers similarly situated or their heirs and the person who appears for or represents them in any case for recovery of monetary claim or benefit, including legal interest arising from accident, illness, or death. And the provision is as is. It's just to make the provision more specific, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. The second amendment is found on page 2 of the measure on line 15. This is the penalty provision, section 4. For it to read any person who violates section 2 and section 3 of this act. So we will insert the words and section 3.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
No other individual amendments, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Madam Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2835 under Committee Report number 177.
So suspended.
A minute suspension, Mr. President.
1 minute suspension. Ano, pwede? Ano nangyari sa lunch?
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
With the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2209 under Committee Report number 147. This is the bill on resource centers for indigenous peoples, Mr. President.
In order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we are in the period of committee amendments. I thus move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Loren Legarda.
Senator Legarda is recognized.
Mr. President, the committee proposes the following additional committee amendments. Before that, we had already introduced committee amendments to Senate Bill 2209 under Committee Report 147.
I don't think that the records will show that the committee amendments were introduced.
May I request for 1 minute suspension, Mr. President?
1 minute suspension.
What's the committee report? You show me what I will read. Hindi ko lang nabasa na saan. Okay.
So we read everything in the addition.
Everything? Saan ito?
Ito yung ating committee amendments. And we said addition.
Saan nga ito?
Yun ba talaga yung goal?
Saan?
Hanggang
Hanggang? Ay, ito lang.
basta inside the
And
community.
then,
And if it's outside
starting,
that's my understanding.
ito lang. Ito. O with this one.
Kasi sa house, your chairman,
And then this.
even if it's not in the community report, you can make information
Okay.
before.
No.
I guess that's true.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
May I read the committee amendments, Mr. President?
Please proceed.
On page 2, line 2, replace the year 2014 with 2015.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
On page 2, line 8, delete the word "and" after the word "recognized" and insert a comma. I submit.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
On page 2, line 8, insert a comma after the word "counted."
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
On page 2, lines 8 to 9, delete the phrase "have freedom to engage" and insert "to freely engage."
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
On page 3, line 3, delete the phrase "departments" and after the word "government" and replace the word "governments" after the word "local" with "government units." I submit.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
On page 3, line 8, delete the word "documentation" and insert the word "documents."
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
On page 3, line 8, delete the phrase "recognition of" and insert the word "recognizes."
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
On page 3, line 8, delete the comma after the word "ICC's eyepiece."
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
On page 3, line 8, insert the word "and" after the word "ICC's eyepiece."
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
On page 3, line 12, insert the letter "S" after the word "provide" to read as "provides."
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
On page 3, line 12, insert the letter "S" after the word "link up" to read as "link ups."
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
On page 3, line 13, delete the phrase "department and."
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
Page 3, line 14, delete the phrase "and enterprises."
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
Page 3, line 16, delete the phrase "promotion of" and insert "promotes."
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
On page 3, line 18, delete the phrase "of maintaining" and replace with the phrase "to maintain."
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
On page 3, lines 18 and 19, delete the phrase "observe laws."
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
On page 3, line 20, delete the word "such" and "existing", insert the word "similar" after the word "other."
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
On page 4, line 21, delete the word after the word "effect."
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
These are additional amendments. As omnibus amendments, delete the phrase "indigenous cultural communities" or ICCs found in the bill title, page 2, lines 4, 10, and 11, and page 3, lines 1, 8, 12, and 17.
Any objection? Hearing none. The omnibus amendments, deleting the phrase "indigenous cultural communities" and deleting the phrase "ICCs."
Thank you,
In-
Mr. Yes.
In the pages indicated by the sponsor is hereby approved.
Thank you. On page 2, line 12, delete the phrase strategic places and replace with state universities and colleges in strategic locations in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao.
Any objection?
I
Hearing
submit.
none, approved.
On page 2, line 14, after the words ethnological locations, delete the period and add the following: and in coordination with the Commission on Higher Education. The concerned state universities and colleges shall each designate in their center a coordinating officer. Period.
Any
I submit.
objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 3, lines 1 to 4, delete the entire section 4. The remaining sections shall be numbered accordingly.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 3, line 22, delete the word commission and replace with state universities and colleges where a center is established. I submit.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 3, line 25, delete the word agencies concerned and replace with concerned state universities and colleges.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 4, line 2, delete the word agencies yearly concerned and replace with annual budget of the concerned state universities and colleges.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 4, line 3, delete the entire section 8 and replace with the same and the following new section: implementing rules and regulations. Within 90 days after the approval of this act, the Commission, together with the Commission on Higher Education, shall issue the necessary rules and regulations for the effective implementation of this act, unquote.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Okay. That's all, Mr. President, for the committee amendments. Thank you.
Senator Legarda.
Mr. President, there being no other committee amendments, I move that we close the period of committee amendments.
So terminated.
I move that we open the period of individual amendments.
Given the extent of the committee amendments, it might be appropriate that we have the printed copy first,
Yes.
with the new committee amendments distributed to
Yes.
the senators before we proceed with the committee on with the period of individual amendments.
Yes. On that note, Mr. President, then I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2209 under Committee Report number 147 to give our colleagues a chance to see the printed copy.
So suspended.
A minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session suspended for 1 minute.
Ready to resume.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, there being no other matter for the day, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Tuesday, September 8, 2015.
Any objection? Hearing none, session is adjourned until September 8, 2015 at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Thank you.